To the PARSE Art Migration Dialogue series. It has been put together by the editorial team, who are Mahmoud Keshwaz, sitting here, research program at Uppsala University. And then we have Nicholas de Genova, who is a scholar of migration, border, citizenship, race and labor, professor and chair of the Department of Comparative Cultural Studies, University of Houston. And then we have Tintin Vulia, who is a postdoctoral fellow at the Academy of Design and Craft and School of Global Studies here at Gothenburg University, and myself, who am a professor of design at the Academy of Design and Crafts here. So we're very happy that we have quite an interesting program this afternoon from 3 to 6:30. But I want to just mention that this is just the first part of a 3-part series, and the next one will be January 24th. And there we will have speakers, for example, Berush Buchani. He will not be here, but through Skype, because he's obviously stuck still on Manu Island. And Arash Kamali Sarvestani, 2 people from Camp Copenhagen. Charles Heller from Forensic Architecture, and migration scholars Nora El Qadim, Alison Muntz, and Sander Mesada. And also there are 2 other themes running as part of PARSE, art and work, and intersectional engagement, for those that could be interested in that. So shortly to just say how the editorial team has framed the topic of art and migration. We have done so accordingly. Over the recent years, we have witnessed a remarkable proliferation of new formation of human cross-border mobility, always excluding some combination of autonomous subjective aspirations and desire, be it the genocidal mass expulsion of Rohingya Muslims from Myanmar, or the mass exodus of Syrians from the devastating civil war in the country across numerous borders from Lebanon and Turkey to Germany and Sweden. In response, we've seen the same social formation of mobility come to be branded as officially unauthorized and plainly illegalized, if not criminalized. And consequently, there have arisen a multiplicity of extra-legal infrastructure dedicated to facilitating these illegalized mobilities, as well as a diverse reaction formation dedicated to enforcing borders. These border formations predictably include an escalation in physical barricades, militarized policing, detention camps, and deportation dragnets, as well as the increasing implementation of new tactics and technologies of securitization and surveillance. At times, these border securitization measures have involved a remarkable blurring of militarized expression of border policing with humanitarian mandate for rescue, as migrants and refugees have been driven into even more risky and lethal forms and pathways of border crossing. Likewise, many regimes of bordering are now externalized, outsourcing border enforcement to multiple nation states and also routinely incorporating privatized security contractors, technology firms and think tanks to implement various features of border migration and asylum enforcement. Knowledge practices and products related to border enforcement have become global marketplace, and even academic research or artistic representation of these phenomena are challenged anew to take account of their own possible complicities with this larger marketization of borders. Consequently, as migration is remaking our world, borders and more diffuse zones of bordering have become key sites of struggles are overdue for investigation and exposure. Therefore, despite oversimplified discourses regarding crisis of borders, migration and refugee movements, these socio-political transformations indisputably signal what is genuinely a crisis of representation. Material, performative, visual practices configured through these various artistic works, design propositions, textual fiction, cartographical imaginations, and other strategies of geospatial visualization have a vital role to play, not only in honing our critical faculties, sensitivities, and sensibilities to the conceptual and affective work of engaging with this incipient world that is being constantly remade by human mobility, but also in providing alternative tools and solutions to the perplexity of mobility in a world of borders. So this thematic PARSE research trajectory focuses on these complex entanglements and specifically wishes to inquire into the embodied, affective, performative, material, visual, and spatial politics of human mobility. A central concern, thus, is the relationship between arts, ethics, and politics. For Rancière, contemporary art's misunderstanding of ethics and through its ethical turn has oppressed the distinction between law and fact, he argues. It has led to, on the one hand, art practices that enforce consensus, that suppress differences within the community. It leads to artsy politics and absolute ethical edict that assign every person a correct place within a social order. A gesture often seen in relational aesthetics aiming to repair supposedly damaged communities. Or it leads to, on the other hand, to withdrawal from the political, where the role of art becomes a never-ending grieving through ethical witnessing of infinite evil. These artistic strategies are prominently present in art addressing migration, and it raised the question if other more productive political aesthetic alternatives are at hand, and we hope to investigate these through this dialogue today. And the program for today is, we will have a set of 20-minute presentations. We start with Shahram Khosravi, and then they will be presented as they just before they go on. And then we have Nuraini, Juliastuti, Elyas, Alavi. Then we have a pause at 4:30, and there are sandwiches and coffee. And then we have Dagmawi, Yimer, and Antje, Missbach. And then we hope to have about an hour of discussion left. So that's the program for today. And welcome, and I hand over the mic to Niklas, who will introduce Khosravi.
So it gives me great pleasure today to be able to introduce Shahram Khosravi. The first time that I came to Sweden, it was at Shahram's invitation, and many times that I've been in Sweden, it was Shahram introducing me. So I now have the pleasure to introduce Shahram. Shahram is a professor of anthropology in Stockholm, also affiliated with the university in Uppsala. And among many publications, including work on Iran, for our purposes, Shahram is probably well known for his book, Illegal Traveler, an auto-ethnography of borders. And this is perhaps a way for me to frame that it's a very precious gift for us in the study of migration to have Shahram as a colleague. Shahram is not only an academic colleague, an anthropologist, and a social critic and theorist, but also someone who has lived the experience of migrating and asylum seeking himself, and so it brings a very important and unique perspective to the scholarly conversation. So, with no further ado, welcome.
Thank you. Do you hear me? Yeah? No? No?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Nicole. It's good to be here. Thanks for invitation. So let me start to saying this, that in this summer I was invited to give a keynote for European anthropologists, and I knew that this is a unique opportunity, and this maybe not happens in 100 years from now again to non-European anthropologists give opening keynote for for such a conference. So I opened my heart and told what I wanted to tell them. And I started with the Italian movie and said, when I was thinking to write my keynote, an image from this Italian movie, Cinema Paradiso, made by Joseph Tornatore from 1988 came to my mind, and this is about a guy going back to his village in Sicily and to attend the funeral of his mentor Alfredo, who was work at the only theater and in the village projections, and he gave him he had left something to this guy, and it was a reel of montage of romantic screen kisses from different movies. The church in the village ordered censoring these kisses, and he collected all these kisses and put together and saved them. Yeah, and this is what I'm doing these recent years. I'm collecting all pieces who are rejected, excluded from academia, from journals, from seminars, because they are regarded as too politicized, because they are regarded as not enough anthropological or something. Yeah. So this is what I'm doing now. I save cases and put them together. And I will talk about time, borders. And let me start with the ethnographic piece from a detention center in Sweden. When I arrived to Märsta Detention Center in December 2014, a few people had gathered in the parking lot to protest against deportation of 15 Afghan migrants later that day. And the streets around the detention center were packed with the police. This is the largest detention center in Sweden, with more than 100 people, a space for more than 100 people, and very close to Arlanda International Airport. It was not my first visit to that detention center. And after the interview with the director, we went for a walk around in different parts of the detention center. I didn't see so much changes since my last visit, but in the main hall, where something caught my eyes, was 5 clocks on the wall showing different time zones in other countries, other continents, where many of the detainees would be deported to. The clocks showed deportees' time, as if their time was not the same as Swedish time. The clocks made the same statement in terms of temporal disbelonging of the inmate as the walls of the detention center do it in terms of spatial disbelonging. The clocks showing different time zones symbolize the geographical stretching out of relations between country of citizenship and host country, between deporting and receiving countries. They disclose the synchronizing operation of removal between different spaces and temporalities, a sort of time-space compression realized not through high-speed technologies, but through bodies of deportees. Swedish self-image of being a good humanitarian welfare society does not tolerate the presence of the excluded. If you cannot be included, you have to be excluded. You have to be not to be here. You should be deported. So the clocks on the wall indicate the deportees tomorrow belongs to somewhere else. So If you don't have a future here, you should be somewhere else. The clocks on the wall in Mashta Detention Center showing other times, displaying this logic. The detainee's body is supposed to be related to another temporality than the ones of Sweden. He or she is out of sync with Swedish time. As we have learned from Benedict Anderson, a nation is imagined not only spatially but also temporally. Bordering practices exclude and include people not only spatially but also temporally. Borders are not only lines dividing territories and tools for management of spaces, but also for integrating people or excluding people from national temporalities. Temporal imagination is a crucial part of national imagination, being part of same timetable, synchronization of the nation, making people to believe they are in the same time. Deportation, as a brutal and visible form of bordering practices, is an explicit statement of temporal disbelonging of deportable people. You should be deported today because your future belongs to somewhere else. The core of colonial racism is the denial of coevalness. That is, the idea of the other belongs to a different time. As post-colonial thinkers like Edward Said or Frantz Fanon and also anthropologist Johannes Fabian showed, the other to the Western self is placed in another time frame than the one Europeans felt they belong to. People categorized as refugees, asylum seekers, and documented people are seen to belong to racial time, a non-white time that legitimizes bordering them, exposing them to criminalization, detention, and deportation. The other belongs to a different time and thereby to a different place. Michael Hanchard and Charles Mills have theorized the racialization of time in the context of Black Americans' experiences of long-term walling and unsettling since the time of slavery. Racial time is defined as unequal temporal access to resources and power. In order to keep people out and limit their access to resources and power, they are excluded not only spatially but also temporally. This is exactly what Fanon meant when he said, "You come too late, much too late." In Fanon's understanding, we arrive to the white time, and it is always too late. We arrive to a pre-existing world of meaning, a world already shaped in which a non-white is not a subject, but only an object. To a white time that is assumed to be secular, civilized, modern, progressive, neutral, the racialized other always come too late. Racialization means one arrives to a world in which bodies are already divided, both spatially and temporally. A world where that access to resources and power is allocated according to this logic of belatedness. In my studies, I have identified 4 conceptual dimensions of temporalities of border practices. I work now on deportation and what happens after deportation, so these ideas come from these fields. So these 4 conceptual dimensions are waiting, delaying, circulation, and time stealing. Waiting, keeping people waiting is a way of experiencing the effect of power. Prolonged waiting engenders a feeling of not being in time with others, not being in sync with others. It can lead to alienation and sense that people around you do what they do has nothing to do with your life and your experiences. Prolonged waiting reinforces precarious conditions in labor market, in related to health or social life. And this is important. This waiting is not existential waiting. for death or for give birth, but it's very political waiting. It's political one, a waiting enforced on people by borders and bordering practices. The second conceptual dimension was delaying. Like keeping people wait, delaying them is a technique of domination. A central function of the Israeli checkpoint is exactly this, constantly delaying Palestinians and thereby racialize their time. And this delaying as part of bordering practices has been done with many other scholars writing about Palestinian situation, but also by scholars like Sandro Mezzadra and Niels, thank you, on Border as Method book, for example. So borders do not stop people but delay them. The journey from Milan to Rome by train takes only several hours. For Hamid, a young refugee, it took 2 weeks since he was stopped, forced to get down and take next train. The distance between Greek-Turkey border and Komotini, a small Greek town, is around 100 kilometers, about 1 hour by train. Ahmed walked that distance 16 times, 15 times he was deported back to Turkey. For Muhammad, the journey from Athens to Berlin took 2 years. Experiencing this delaying and constantly being delayed is part of not being stopped but delayed, and delay to arrive, to delay to start what is supposed to be a normal life. And it is soon too late to go to university. It is soon too late to find a partner. It is soon too late to have children. Youth seems to not be a transitional stage, but it's endless position of not becoming in what is supposed to be a normal life. And this delaying and waiting is best manifested for me in long queues outside European embassies in Asia and Africa. It's amazing scenes to see people are waiting outside embassies. And for example, getting time for interview for European embassies in Tehran is 1 year, sometimes 2 years. So this kind of delaying and people keeping them waiting is part of bordering practices. This paperwork is a new form of bordering practices. Delaying reminds you your place in the racial hierarchy. The third aspect of temporal is circulation. The third aspect of border temporalities is keeping people in this condition of circulation. A common experience of the condition of deportability, what Nicholas has coined the term, a common experience of the condition of deportability and deportation is being sent back to in time, expressed in terms of being sent back to square one. The sense of being back to square one shows how people are deprived of the time that must be invested to settle down in the country they are deported from. Keeping people in circulation is a way to defer and a way to deny them any future plans and to make a disruption of their time cycle. A life in circulation is a position of not becoming in what is supposed to be a normal life. So this is again and again, this disruption, delaying, deferring people of what they think what a normal life is. In the condition of circulation, one never gets the chance to finish anything, to finish a school, to finish a training, to get married, finish achievement of some project in life. Unlike the disciplinary society that operates by immobilizing and confining the people, the regime of circulation people is more similar to the Deleuzian control of society that operates by keeping people on constantly move, continuously on the move. People are sent back and forth between not only countries, but between different positions, yeah? Between undocumentedness and deportability, between countries, between legislation, between institutions, between periods of waiting. In this condition, to borrow Melanie Griffith's terminology, life is formed by a sticky time or suspended time during delaying and being delayed and waiting, and frenzied time during border crossing or deportation. So it's slow time and fast time always. You are sent back and forth. Yeah, this keeps people in circulation, so their experience is usually an experience of not arriving or arriving too late, as Fanon put it. Yeah. Circulation is a control mechanism that pushes them toward the square one again and again. In my research, among people deported to Kabul, I see the majority of them will start a new migration, and reports say that up to 75% of people deported to Kabul start a new migration within a year. Yeah. So these young Afghans are stuck between a powerful transnational apparatus which forcibly exclude them from the global north, and on the other side, circumstances and the forces that push them out from the global south. So deportation of them will not put an end to the migration cycle, but it's only another phase of phase of recirculation. So in this case, we have, and those people I study and are deported belong to Hazara minority in Afghanistan. So circulation of a situation, condition of being ethnic minority in Afghanistan, experiencing discrimination in the country of citizenship, undocumentedness, undocumented migrant condition as undocumented migrant worker in Iran or Pakistan, irregular migrant through the Balkans, failed asylum seekers in European countries, and deportees in Afghanistan again. So this is what happens, yeah? This is what happens to many of them. So as Prem Kumar Rajram writes in a recent article, this is how a surplus population is constructed. People racialized and marginalized who are denied a chance to valorize their labor. And this has not happened only to non-citizens. It's happened more and more to citizens too. And Norway is one of those countries, starting with deporting citizens earlier than any other country. In 2017, a young man, Mahad Abib Mahmoud, was deported from Norway after 17 years. And he was Norwegian, and he went to Norway at 14 years old, got asylum, got Norwegian citizenship, went to university, job, wife, house, what is supposed to be a normal life. After 17 years, the Norwegian authorities said, you are not from Somalia, you are from Djibouti. And they took back citizenship and deported him. So he was on Iceland earlier this year, seeking asylum again, and was rejected. So again, this is what I mean with recirculation. So he was sent back to square one, yeah? And this is not only one example. We have some other example of citizens who are turned to non-citizens and deported. And this delaying keeping in waiting and put them in circulation result in the fourth aspect I want to talk about, and this is about how their time is stolen. Forcing people into waiting, delaying, and keeping them is part of an exploitative economic system that result in accumulation of wealth through stealing time. Capital growth through stealing of workers' time, and this became more explicit in terms of deportation and bordering practices. And we should remember that we live in an age of mass deportation. Almost 3 million people were deported from the United States between 2009 and 2016. Several million more are scheduled to be deported during coming years, according to Trump. Europe is organizing deportation of almost 100,000 to Afghanistan alone. Likewise, mass deportation is growing outside the global north. Saudi Arabia has deported hundreds of thousands of people every year in recent years. And since 2016, more than 1 million Afghans have been deported from Iran and Pakistan to Afghanistan. So how much time has been stolen? And what is the worth of this time in terms of labor? When people are spatially removed, they automatically are robbed of an amount of time. People, particularly long-term residents, have worked, built network, paid taxes, spent time learning the local language and becoming familiar with the culture, maybe fallen in love and maybe have children before they are sent back to the countries they are citizens of. The time people have invested to achieve these goals is lost by deportation. The time people have spent to accumulate social and cultural capital is taken away by deportation. Sudden arrest and deportation means having no chance to prepare for the journey, to sell properties, to claim wages. So being deportable usually means that one has lived an informal life, undocumented life, a clandestine life, with a job that was not registered, with no insurance. So arrest and deportation usually means impossibility of reclaiming this. An illegalized life is unreclaimable since it is not considered to have existed at all. So what about taxes? And this happens very common in terms of deportation, for example, from Iran. When people cannot claim wages. So, and we are talking about many thousands hours of labor. So you can imagine how much money we are talking about employers can save thanks to deportation. So what happens to unpaid wages after deportation? How about unused holidays? How about money states can save in form of unpaid pensions? Remember this guy from who was deported from Norway. He worked, lived 17 years, paid taxes, everything, and he has no access. And who gets these resources? This is Norwegian state. So how much surplus value has been produced for capitalists through deportation globally? As Marx has shown, surplus value is generated from time the capitalists don't pay for, the time they steal from the lives of laborers. The extra value added to commodities comes from stolen time. Like people who have been trafficked, deportees' time is actively stolen. So this is very important for me to provoke and to make deportation very similar to trafficking in person. We can talk about it later, how I mean with that. Using the term stealing shows how deportation is part of the accumulation of wealth in the hands of a few by taking away from deportable people their saved, spent, and invested time. And emphasizing how on this stealing time repoliticize the concepts of border that have been naturalized and depoliticized by the ideology of nation states. Bordering practices is part of a global apartheid of mobility right. Which is very important again to link this to the capitalism, system. No time?
Well, you can.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm almost finished. Yeah. So an accumulation of wealth, and in this way, repoliticize all these concepts and questions, delaying people, keeping people waiting, keeping them in circulation. Is a part of controlling workers, working labor force, and the bordering practices construct surplus population who are exposed to a broad expulsion. And this is also something I find in my study, what happens after deportation. People are not only deported from a state, but we see that these people are exposed to multiple expulsion. They are expelled from different layers of societies, both here and there, from citizenship, from having access to citizenship rights, from labor market, from housing market, from spheres of security, healthcare system, education system, and state protection. And I think I stop. Yeah. Thank you.
Allow for 2 quick questions if someone has. Are there any quick questions? We will have also a discussion and opportunity for questions at the end. We'll return to it.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shahram. Our next speaker is Nuraini Juliastuti in your program, and she's more popularly known as Nuning. Nuning co-founded Kunci Cultural Studies, a research collective which focuses on creative experimentation and speculative inquiry between theory and practice. And it is Kunci Cultural Studies Center was founded in Yogyakarta in Indonesia in 1999. Nuning is trained as an anthropologist. And her academic background includes a Master of Science in Contemporary Asian Studies from the University of Amsterdam and PhD in Cultural Anthropology from Leiden University. Her research writing have been published widely in Indonesian media and cultural organizations, international art publications like Art Monthly Australia, After All Journal, an artist book and monograph published by State Lake Museum and Sternberg Press, and refereed academic journal like Jurnal Perempuan and Inter-Asia Cultural Studies. In collaboration with Kunci, she has produced a body of research works which uses publication, exhibition, and gathering as modes of presentation and engagement. One of these is the Made in Commons project, Made in Commons, which was presented in the Stedelijk Museum Bureau Amsterdam in 2013, and Jogja National Museum in 2015. And in 2015, in collaboration with Parasite and Indonesian migrant workers in Hong Kong, Kunci developed Afterword Reading Club, a reading club dedicated to the literature on modes of gendered migration, which she will present today. In 2011, Kunci also developed Tropical Dissonance, Decolonizing Knowledge Through Colonial Archives, and presented it at the Tropenmuseum Amsterdam. Currently, Kunci is working on a long-term project titled School of Improper Education, 2016 to 2019, a project to experiment with different modes of pedagogy practices and implement them within contemporary social environment. Nuning herself is currently developing her own project titled Domestic Notes, a publication-based project that looks at domestic and migrant spaces as sites to discuss everyday politics, organization of makeshift support system, and alternative cultural production. Would you like to do the PowerPoint as well? Yeah. Is it on? Oh, yeah.
Do you have any sound for this?
No. Hi everyone. Thank you for Erling and Tintin and also Mansur for Mahmoud, sorry, for inviting Kunci here. It's an honor for us to speak about our program here. So I will talk about a project that Kunci worked with Parasite in Hong Kong and a group of Indonesian migrant domestic workers in Hong Kong called Afterwork Reading Club. It happened in 2015, so we got an invitation from Parasite to conduct an explorative research about the lives of Indonesian domestic migrant workers in Hong Kong. And it is part of Hong Kong's migrant domestic workers project that Parasite currently work on. And our research experience during the residency brought our attention to a community of laborers and writers that exist amongst the community and the mobile library that they set up in Victoria Park. That's the name of the park that become the main site of these migrant workers. They hang out every Sunday, and it is the same group of domestic workers that later became the main participants of our project. So we called our project A Room of Their Own. And we thought about the project to be like a long-term project comprising a range of activities, reading groups, publications, and audiobook projects. And as a starting point, we organized something that we called Afterwork Reading Club. It's a reading group of 6 sessions dedicated to literary works about mobility and migration. So we selected a list of short stories and then play script produced by Indonesian writers of various genres and literary styles. So I need to explain here that Kunci is not a collective that focuses on literature, but we intentionally adopted literary works as our entry point because they open up like wide possibilities for shared interpretation. And we think that this could be, a way of, by using these works as a common ground for discussion, we projected that Kunci and also the participating members of the migrant worker community would approach the project on equal footing, that we are both non-expert readers in the field of literature. So the after-work reading club itself held in 5 locations: Victoria Park, a private house, artist studio, and apartment for resident artists. And during the project, we paid close attention to how migrant workers deploy alternative ways to produce knowledge. We noticed that since mid-2000s at least, there has been an increasing numbers of books, short stories compilation written by migrant workers being published. Writers collective are flourishing, and some of them also receive support from labor unions and non-governmental organizations. And within the popular discourse narrative, works produced by these migrant workers tend to be generalized under like a single category, like migrant workers literature. And I think we wanted to challenge this notion by questioning what is entailed in these categorizations. But we realized that on the one hand, some of the stories, or maybe mainly the majority of the stories written by migrant workers, indeed connected by like a thread that runs through the issues related to so how they like everyday struggles in making ends meet in a foreign country. And if you read these texts, they often reproduce the narrative of like a misery and emulate the dark realities that afflict many migrant workers. And to some extent, this is the kind of representation that repetitively used to represent these migrant workers' literature, that it is something that can lead their work sound cliche. And we think that it loses power to inspire critical reflection. Because if we look a bit further and really read the text, we can see different narratives as how each individual there engage with other forms of subjectivity as they continuously expose themselves to the distancing effects of the act of writing fiction, of writing poems, for instance. So in these works we meet different characters falling in love, maybe like traveler getting lost, prolific writer, women in search for an identity, or a woman coming out, being a lesbian, or a mother taken over by deep longing. So in short, this is the spectrum of subjectivity and realm of fiction that is not bound to, nor it can be domesticated, by the stereotypical category of migrant workers. So there are a number of theoretical concepts that we try to engage in this project, like the idea of fiction that can be used not to describe literary style, but also to echo Kamala Visweswaran as a narrative strategy that can represent like subtle moments of contestation within the process of subjectivity construction. And so here the written narratives of migrant workers not only suggest the desire to build like a room of their own, as argued by Virginia Woolf, but also commitment to render time as meaningful. Because for many migrant workers that live in Hong Kong or maybe in other country far away from home, it really provides them with the opportunity to lead their lives in relative freedom and possibility to carve out their own space and time. And this is clearly not an easy task to perform, because writing is a laborious activity, very tedious, and writer must be disciplined and have a strong sense of self-determination. But amidst this challenging situation, many migrant workers that we met continue to write using any readily available medium from a notebook or laptop to mobile phone or even a piece of toilet paper. And many of them are very savvy in technology. So they often use Facebook as well to post their stories. It wasn't any wonder I found myself typing in the dark. I had to force myself to find the letters on the keyboard, so arranging a sentence was a long and painful process. I also had to type lying down on my bed, since if the grandma knew I was still awake in the middle of the night, she would throw a tantrum and tell my male employer. Therefore, I put my laptop on my belly, pressing my fingers on the keyboard slowly and with difficulty. My cruel grandma always found a way to pick at my mistakes and tell them to my male employer. She must have thought that finding my mistakes would make her a heroine. Usually after dinner time, she would proudly recite my mistakes one by one in front of my employers. He was rarely at home, so he entrusted me to his mother, and she was a vile slanderer. So, to find pleasure in the predicaments of writing is the very definition of aesthetic pleasure. This is what Shahram said. So much of the ideas behind this project is inspired by Rancière's elaboration in The Nets of Labor, where he argues that the production of writing by the workers is a condition of displacement or disidentification that should be considered as an important political action. So the act of writing performed by the workers can be seen as an attempt to disrupt the established division of labor, where the educated elite, capitalist owners, are assigned with intellectual tasks, while the workers are burdened with the menial work. By featuring and endorsing the creation of narratives by migrant workers that revolve around their refusal to be domesticated by their domesticated labor, we can tease out different ways how they exercise their rights to think critically. As an autonomous site for producing, distributing, and accumulating knowledge, the act of writing ultimately provides migrant worker communities with a critical capacity to cultivate a culture of epistemic disobedience. So, because this is a collective reading activity, we gave emphasis to the necessity of reading as a non-productive gesture. Because in most cases, buying and reading books among migrant workers is still underlined by capitalist mode of consumption. And also for most of us, reading books mainly serves as the purpose for further work references, and we would like to revisit this routine and through thinking by doing, and ask how do we consume books for the sake of pleasure without falling back into the trap of capitalist consumption, or how do we recreate non-productive space and time amidst the monochromatic mainstream sensibility which view it as a rare luxury amidst merciless working hours. And we, from this book, from this work, we produce after-work readings that like a logical extension really from the after-work reading club. And it's an anthology where incorporates all the materials discussed in the first section in the reading group. It explores the notion of reading, writing, working, time, space, and how all of this relate to the seemingly contradictory aspects of migrant workers' lives, both as workers and writers. So after 6 reading sessions, it's still actively running up to today, with the participants themselves organizing more gatherings on their own to discuss various literary works. And we have Afterwork Reading Club Facebook page. We intentionally maintain this online platform to mediate, remote communication between members to publish textual works, and it is now developing into an organic, open community for the self-study of different modes of reading and writing. I'm going to read another story from this. The woman peeked out from behind the kitchen door. She whimpered in pain, holding her stomach, feeling nauseous and hungry. Hungry not because there was no food, but because she had lost their appetite. Her employer's family and their 5 guests were sitting at the dining table and enjoying the meal that she had served of chicken seasoned with soy sauce. Between the sounds of the chopsticks against the bowls, she heard a comment from one of the guests. "I think this is the most delicious soy sauce chicken I have ever tasted." The woman behind the door could not endure it any longer. She went to the bathroom again. For the umpteenth time, she threw up all of the contents of her stomach. Then she sat down limply behind the bathroom door. Her tears flowed slowly. She was heartsick as she wept over her index finger, of which several millimeters had been sliced off, and along with her blood had become part of the dish she had served for her employer's dinner. This is from The Tragedy of the Soy Sauce Finger. So I want to, do I still have time? I want to I want to also contextualize this after-work reading club within the existing kuncis practices. The idea of reading together, which culminated in publishing an anthology, seems to appropriate or fits well with how we value studying in terms of working with and about the various communities that we occupy, contribute to, and benefit from. And in the early days of Kunci, this included setting up a newsletter, cultural studies newsletter, distributing emails through email lists, and over time has evolved into setting up a library, doing formal collaborative research project, and more recently founding the School of Improper Education. So this is basically like a school, non-alternative school, where we experiment with a specific like 4 alternative modes of pedagogy. First, the idea of, if you're familiar with the Soranshare encourage us to dismantle the idea of the teacher as a leading figure in the class and propose the possibilities for creating like a learning environment from a situation where the students and the children do not know anything about a certain subject. And then second, Turba, it's an abbreviation from turun ke bawah, or get down to the grassroots. This is a work method formulated by the Institute of People's Culture in the 1950s and 1960s to incorporate learning from the people element, in doing art. And then third, nyantrik. This is a Japanese word to say a common method for learning from the masters. Basically, practice within the local art community. And fourth, Taman Siswa, or Garden of Students method, taken from Suwardi Suryaningrat's teaching principle, in which family is imagined to be a productive site to care and encourage the development of the students. So I'm thinking about, because now Kunji School second phase is drawing to a close, the turun ke bawah phase. I'm thinking if in this phase, if knowing is going into unfamiliar spaces of learning, to go to unfamiliar space includes the willingness to let go some of our privilege, and getting down to the root, and meaning to let us being exposed to a new kind of precariousness. And how should we define knowledge that produce from precariousness? And if our Hong Kong residency, for instance, equal to going under as Turba, so what does under here mean? So I'm just thinking that maybe going under means to work to a place that is Hong Kong and meet with this group of migrant workers that we would not otherwise, met. And to meet with the migrant workers in Hong Kong means to meet with the guests of Hong Kong, with them, imagining migrants, their positions as the migrant workers in Hong Kong, as the guests in Hong Kong, and think and meet with us, as a new guest also in Hong Kong, and so to follow the publication of afterwork readings, we received an email from an activist of Taiwan International Workers Associations, TIWA, and the email stated that she attempted to bring the afterwork readings to Taipei prison as a reading material for the Indonesian migrant workers inmates in the institution. So this book is very bulky, as you can see. It's very thick, and the prison officer believed that it could potentially be used as a weapon. So the labor activists decided to rip off the book and took out only the Indonesian part, translation, because this is bulky, because it is Indonesian, English, and then Mandarin and Tagalog. So the book, which traveled to the prison, opened up like a new way for us to get to know with a range of individuals and cultural organizations around Taiwan that work with migrant workers. So there's this initiative called Taiwan Literature Award for Migrants, and there is this brilliant Time bookstore, NGOs, online media, and museum that this is different activities that set up by journalists and artists in Taiwan. And this is just my way to conclude this talk. I had an opportunity to be one of the jury members of the annual Taiwan Literature Award for Migrants. It is an international competition, basically, for migrant workers who work and live in Taiwan. It started in 2012. It's very popular writing competition, and so each year the organizer would receive around 400 to 500 entries from the migrant workers, and the number of entries coming from the Indonesian migrant workers for the competition is usually the highest, between 120, 130 to 180 entries per year. So what started as an involvement in the evaluation process of the competition later grew into like a possibility to develop like an archives of the migrant workers' writings. So today, Kunci must have probably have compiled around 800 to 1,000 texts of migrant workers. So all of them entries submitted to the competition from 2012 to 2018. So, so this is maybe the like a new direction of our projects, and I began to see this. They are the archives that emerge from constant attempts at dealing with different types of borders that informs by hardship, cycle of poverty, feeling of lacking something. And thinking of possibility to develop it into like a tools for working with migrant workers' texts. This is a very, I've partly inspired by this earlier talk. The text written by the migrant workers is always very biographical, detail, like tracing in great detail on how they become migrant workers, how they become buruh, the Indonesian word for labor. It is as if they also want to understand why they become one and why they are unable to not become labor. It is not uncommon to see a migrant worker who has a father, mother, but mostly mother, or relative that is also a very experienced migrant worker. So it's like a cycle, family. So this is, in the end, I see this text as archives of women that are trying to build like family history of migrant workers, family. And this is like I began to see this drive with 1,000 texts like a giant strange fruit maybe that I can peel off. Then each piece of the fruit peels contains new quotes where we can learn like more stories, tactics of living, wisdom, boredom, domestic violence, forced mobility, travel not as a privilege, domestic life. I think I'm just going to close my talk. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nuraini. Luning, is there any question? We have time for 2 short questions. Is there? Yes, Nicola.
Could I just ask you to explain the name Kunchi?
Kunchi. You mean the meaning of? Oh, good question. Kunchi means key, basically. Key, it's an Indonesian word for key. And Kunchi Cultural Studies Center. It is very common at that time after the Reformasi for independent cultural organizations to name ourselves with a very simple name, Kunci, and then something space, ruang rupa. I don't know, maybe this is just our way of trying to make ourselves different from other, state-led cultural organizations. But interestingly, many independent cultural organizations that born right after Reformasi, like us, also maybe unconsciously choose like Cultural Studies Center. Very formal name, because it seems like we couldn't find another way of saying how alternative and what kind of alternative vision or plans that we want to achieve after this. So we stuck with that, with that kind of formality, which is, of course, that's not our direction. But you will see that traces in many art and cultural organizations after Reformasi in Indonesia.
Thank you so much for your inspirational presentation. I just wonder, many questions actually. I could just ask about the sort of who are the main sort of initiators for the project, because I just wonder how the group dynamics, for example, in creating your collective and also migrant workers, and really impressed by sort of literacy and their willingness to produce such text, each person probably, and then, but in the end, the persons who gathered the text and then published probably are some of you, some of many. So there could be like, even though you want to avoid those kind of, or limit those gaps between subject, object, and researcher and the others. But even so, there could be some kind of power relations. I was wondering.
I think even before we had the idea of developing after-work reading club with these migrant workers, we are already very familiar with the works, literature produced and written by these migrant workers, and so that because we in Kunci we also read this kind of text. even though we never came to Hong Kong before, it's their works is very familiar for us, and many of these writings are self-produced and self-published, and I think the way how we come up with the idea is clearly we are inspired by this writing production, and in Hong Kong they're already very active. So I think Indonesian migrant workers in Hong Kong is a very active in a way that we like, nongkrong, or we like hang out together, and that's what they mainly do every Sunday. And when they do, as I show in the picture, they bring books, and they even have their own mobile library using their suitcase, and so that's actually a major thing that inspired us. So trying to combine writing, and then but also trying to define writing not as a production of something, but play around the idea of productivity with how they use time. That's very interesting for us, because as a migrant worker, as a domestic worker, basically they don't really have much time to write. Yet they make time. So writing is like a statement of how they trying to make their own space and time. So this cycle, like writing and then reading, and trying to emphasize reading here in our project as part of leisure too. Migrant workers from the aspects of human rights. During the reading sessions, we trying to make fiction as the focus, and just trying to think about fiction because in their writing they produce fiction, and then in the reading sessions we trying to also make fiction as the focus of the reading material, thinking that this can be something that trying to develop political imagination from fiction. And the way we design, the way we choose or select texts for the reading sessions is we trying to think about their spaces, their domestic spaces too, like kitchen and then parks. So trying to think about types of literature that might resonate with their living and working condition too. So that's basically what we are trying to do. Yeah.
Thank you, Nuning. If there are any other questions, we'll please keep it with you, because we're going to have an hour of discussions at the end, and we hope to see you then as well. But I'll give Mahmoud is going to introduce.
Thank you, Nuraini, for interesting presentation. I think the idea of time is somehow following up. وطن کجاست؟ وطن میزی چوبی که دور آن چای نوشیدیم، دم تازه کردیم پیش از آن که ماموران اداره مهاجرت ما را بیابند. Where is the homeland? The homeland, a wooden table at which we drank tea and breathed a sigh of relief just before the immigration police caught us. These powerful lines that capture an instance of owning time and space, even momentarily, despite the fear of arrest and deportation, are one of many strong poems of Elyas Alavi. I first read Elyas' work back in Iran in 2008, a powerful voice of Afghan refugees and undocumented migrants who constantly were and still are subject to governmental suppression, economic exploitation, and social discrimination from the Iranian society. Elyas Alavi is a multidisciplinary visual artist based on Adelaide, South Australia. He's primarily working in the form of painting, installation, performance art, and recently video art. Alavi was born in Daikundi province, Afghanistan, and moved to Iran as a child following the intensification of war in his homeland. And in late 2007, he moved to Australia as a refugee at risk. Alavi graduated from a Master's by Research of Visual Arts in 2015 and a Bachelor of Visual Arts honored in 2012 at the University of South Australia, and has exhibited nationally and internationally in different galleries in cities like Tehran, Kabul, Brisbane, Sydney, Adelaide, and Melbourne. Alavi also is best known as an internationally renowned poet. He published 3 poetry books in Iran and Afghanistan. First poetry book, I'm a Daydreamer Wolf, published in 2008 in Tehran, which is 5th edition, came out in 2016, followed by Some Wounds in 2012 in Kabul and Hudud in 2015 in Tehran. Alavi visits many issues in his works, but mainly memory, migration, displacement, exile, gender issues, separation, and human nature. The main part of his work as an artist reflects upon his Hazara background, a marginalized ethnic group originally from Afghanistan, as he uses his particular experiences and contemplations as an epistemological model for the dislocation of people. This autoethnographic approach offers a representative perspective for other displaced people and contributes to a deepening knowledge of the refugee and migration experience. Alavi regularly runs art and poetry workshops in community centers and schools in Adelaide. So please, join me in welcoming Elyas Alavi, please.
Salam, Asr Shama Bekhair. Hello and good afternoon. First of all, I would like to say thank you to the University of Gothenburg University, and to all of you who organized this seminar. I'm really honored to be here, and I'm just so happy to be in Sweden as well. I expected to be more cold here, but it's not really so. I didn't use most of my jackets, which I brought from Australia. So that's a good thing, yeah, it's really good. So thank you so much, Mahmoud, for the introduction. You did make my work a bit easier, because I was going to say some of those things here, but I go straight and basically I'm going to show you some of my work, because my work is very ethnographic approach, and basically it's based on my experience born in Afghanistan, then lived in Iran for a very long time, and then now living in Australia. So if I describe myself in one word or in 2 words, it would be a person who'd been taken from its root. So that would be the word uprooted. We have a very amazing tradition in a village which I come from, where a child born, we plant a tree for him or her to honor that person. And my parents told me I also have my tree. So I painted this work before seeing that tree, based on the description that my parents gave it to me. And it was just so important to know that there is that alive thing on that village. And I think that was one of the very main things to always give me that inspiration to go back and find that tree. On that time, I've even painted some places which my parents described. For example, this one is a very historical place in Mazar Sharif, which I found it so interesting. So I lived in Iran for a very long time. Shahram had a really amazing talk about some of the experiences Afghans face in Iran, and it was 1989 when we left Afghanistan, and it took us nearly a year to get to Iran. So we stayed in camps for quite a long time in Pakistan, and then in the border between Iran and Afghanistan. And once I got to Iran, even we speak the same language and we share the same culture, the same history, and even the same religion, and even the same sub-religion as a Hazara person. There are so many discriminations against Afghan refugees. So I always felt the suburb I live, it's like a ghetto, it's like a detention camp, and we have a word called Ordugah, which means the detention camp. So there are so many Ordugahs around, not so many, but maybe at least 6 or 7. Some of them are in between the borders of Afghanistan and Iran, and some of them families can live, and then they can have permit to go to the city or to work. And but even those who have some sort of documents, or they could somehow live illegally without document, there is no way except that you need to go and live in those suburbs which is around the cities, and it is so much different to other parts of the city. So I lived in a suburb called Dagmawi around Mashhad, and I always felt that suburb is like a ghetto, is like a detention camp, but we cannot see those walls, those wire fences. And in this work, which is in 2014, when I had a trip back to Iran, because my parents still live there, and I did this work where for about 5 hours I used the threads and the strings, starting from the start of the suburb and trying to wire, basically wrap them around the trees and the columns. And my idea was to basically try to make visible those invisible walls, and just saying, at least for 1 minute, people can see that this is a ghetto, this is a detention camp. And these threads are also unraveled by my mother's hand. So my mother kept so many clothes from other refugees, and then as many of the refugees do, especially a big family, just to see what we can do, basically use everything. And that was quite a very important thing as well, that my mother touched those strings and those threads. Just to show kind of the extent of the challenges Afghans face in a country like Iran. It could be in many other places as well. So we have so many difficulties in Pakistan and I'm sure in Sweden as well, and also in Australia. In this work, it's a performance work, and I ask audience who came to the gallery, I ask them if they want to give a bit of their blood and then put it inside a plastic bag and simply just place it on the wall. So you would have a like a line of plastic bags containing bloods of Iranians and also of Afghans as well. And simply I just wanted to, everyone can have their own kind of interpretation, but for me it was like how we can find out which one is, which blood belong to who. And I have a sister which she has a kidney problem, and in Iran it's almost impossible to have an Iranian person to donate or give his organ or her organ to an Afghan person. And for me it was like such a quite a difficult rule and very inhuman rule. Also, you cannot donate blood. So, for example, if there is any kind of natural disaster, and if you want to donate the blood, they say thank you, but we're not going to accept your blood because you're not from here. And so in this work, I kind of worked on that, and it takes about 1 hour, and then there are some parts which I use ice, which is one of the main objects that I use a lot. Especially in Iran, we have quite a long piece of ice, and it looked like a body to me. And then in one point, I make some holes on those ices, and then pour and mix these bloods together, and kind of, and then I wrote at the end with the remaining blood, just saying who gives a fuck really, and just saying these bloods will be wasted anyway, and the ice will melt. And this work. So I just wrote a few things. For example, so as I said, like we face so much challenges living in a country like Iran, but also those who left in their own country, they also experienced sort of exile as well. Once we left Afghanistan for the first time, a brother and sister couldn't come with us, so they left there. And I met my sister after 21 years in 2013, and just sometime after our first reunion, she described the long years of separation from the rest of the family as سالهای غربت در خانه, and basically she said the years of exile at home, and that was quite very powerful and very striking for me as well. Even those who left in the first country, they also feel that kind of exile. And her experiences was very similar to another figure in my family, which is my grandmother. And so she came with us to Iran, and I learned a lot from her. She was a very storyteller person, and very funny. She always dye her hair, and she was very, very happy in general. But at the end of her life, she got Alzheimer, and she always, once she woke up, she would name us differently, and as she imagined that she's still living on that village that she left for the last 25 years, and always felt that she has that yearning to go back to that village. She couldn't make it, and she passed away in Iran. But what I did was I tried to somehow get something belong to her and then take it back to that village. So I took her favorite scarf and went to the village and took some photos and placed it in different locations. And on the last day I was coming back to Bamiyan, where on top of the village I saw this rock, which for me was very strange. Why it's there, and it's a natural rock, and to me it was like as if it's a person standing there and looking at me, and I felt that my grandmother surely passed that road many times, and she might also pause there and just look at this rock. So I positioned the scarf on top of that rock and took this picture. So I stayed there for an hour, and then thinking of how I could present that work as an artwork, and in a gallery, I came to this idea, especially knowing the first time it was a snowy day and the snow was coming. So I decided to use ice, and I've frozen the same scarf, and then positioned it in the gallery. And so the photograph is at the back, and then at the front we have this ice, which will melt over 2-3 days. Then I wrote a poem which is about a conversation I had with my grandmother while a sister another sister had to go to another city, and I can read this part which says, "We hugged each other tightly and quickly let go, with no hope of seeing each other. We cried, 'Hope to see you soon.' Mother laughed, 'Surely this isn't a journey to Kandahar.' We too smiled, bitter smiles." This is a part of a poem. Then I always fascinated by first by the butchery shops and also by newspapers. Even now, most of the butchers in Afghanistan they wrap the meats with newspaper. So for me it was like quite a interesting thing how those news of explosions and kidnapping and attacks and all of that will be around this meat, which later will be served at home among the family members and children and night. So kind of showing just the reality of life in a country in conflict like Afghanistan. And in these works, I used newspapers from different places, different languages as well. And it started with this work where in 2013, before the federal election in Australia, there was a big debate of what we do with these boat people. and they invading our country, and both major parties, they used this topic basically to gain more votes. And for me it was like seeing every day pictures of people on the boat. For example, in this one you can see there's a group of refugees coming by boat, and majority from Iran are sitting on the boat, and then there is a line saying basically that the PNG, the Papua New Guinea plan, which basically sent them there, and for me it was like how they use these people, these human beings, as like they just see them as say 50 kilograms of meat and 70 kilograms of meat, and so let's sell them really, and then to gain more votes, as they did. So the Liberal Party won, and they also harshened traveling, basically people coming and get to Australia. So as you know, we have detention centres around Australia, like Manus and Nauru, and hundreds of people are kept there, some for 5 years even, and so many even teenagers and children, they committed suicide as well. In some of my work, even I try to use the basically the even the meat itself. In this one, I used basically a heart from a ship, and then every day I would change that, and then so basically the fresh blood will be poured onto the newspapers underneath as well. And in a way, for me, it was like how it's just by using newspapers from different languages just to show what has happened. For example, in Europe in World War II, it's happening somehow now, and in a way, it could happen anywhere. You know, like you could be the next wave of refugees, and also by especially in 2015, once we got the new wave of migrants and refugees coming, especially to Europe. I gathered newspapers and also saved some of those images. In this one, for example, it's a photograph from a refugee person who died, and his body was just left near the shore, and local people basically just walking past, and because there were so many of them in Greece, and then I cut it out and then use it in other magazines. For me, it was like to making artworks, especially in 2015 about the refugee crisis, was quite difficult in a way that I felt, what is my position if I make this kind of work and I become unknown as an artist, and in a way I always have this dilemma to kind of position myself. Am I using these images and these people to basically make myself more well known, or so I didn't make those works. I gathered for quite a long time, and these works are mainly done in 2018. So I kind of needed that a bit of a time to absorb it and to think about it more. In another work, which is quite recent, in 2018, is also refers a lot to what happened in 2018. I gathered photographs from mainly from Hazara people who either got killed in Afghanistan because just basically because being a member of Hazara ethnic group, or those who try to get to a safe place like Sweden or Europe or Australia. And one of the portraits is from a guy called Khosravi, which he was a refugee and he came to Australia, and kind of the same, similar to that case, he was accepted and he came and lived in the community. He did a small driving mistake. It wasn't a major problem. I think he passed the red light or something like that. But for that, they sent him back to Christmas Island, and then he had quite a difficult time there. And then after they accepted him again, and he was living in the community. And then one day, police came to arrest him and basically deport him. He wasn't at home, and his friends told him. But it was too much for him, and sadly he took his life and basically burnt himself near the Dandenong, which is a suburb in Melbourne in 2016. So for example, there are portraits like him on that series. These are also some of the other portraits from that series, and there is a bit of a gap between the wall and the glass work. So it was all done on the glass. And once we have the light, you can see another face on the wall as well, and sometimes more than two faces. And for me, it was like kind of playing with that idea of which one is real, and also just to show, especially the fragility of human body, and if you belong to a minority like us, our minority, basically you're so fragile. You could basically not be alive next day, as it happened in 2016 while I was in Afghanistan. There was a protest, a peaceful protest, and sadly there was a bomb. Nothing really happened. No one brought to justice. Then I did this series of work which also refers to that refugee crisis in 2015, because two of my brothers, they took this risky journey, and even one of them was born in Iran, but he wasn't allowed to go to university, for example, or even study. He's a bit of a character, and he had a bit of a difficulty at the school, and his principal called him bad names, basically referring him like, you're from Afghanistan, and he had a big fight, and then they said you never can go to any school in Iran. Then he and my older brother, they started a journey, living in Iran, going to Turkey and then Greece, and then crossing 9 borders altogether, and finally got to Sweden. So they are in a small city at Byared, which someone told me it should be Yared, something like that. Yeah, very very close to Malmo. And these works are really relate to that time, and especially my connection with my family, and how even those who are born there in a country like Iran never can see that there could be a future. As part of that work, there's a Yimer work which says "Vatan Kojast" in Farsi, which means "Where is the homeland?" And in one work, we see this painting, which almost is quite difficult to see the details because it's all done just by using yellow color. And for me, it was like just in purpose to show that you cannot see it unless you really walk close and see it from close. So if I change this, the contrast a bit, you can see more details in this one. And so it's from a front page of the Australian newspaper, and it shows a group of refugees trying to get to Greece. And then, as you might notice, there is a picture of Ivan Cordy down the bottom there, and then his father as well. And then there are some of the text about that time. And then the other side of the work is this work, which kind of showing the other part of the journey. So they were trying to get to Europe, and now they are in Europe. So this picture is from another photograph where it shows a young man basically fell down on a railway in Serbia, and police officers chasing him, and just kind of showing that this is the asylum that they were looking for, and that question of where is the homeland really. So as you might know, I do write poetry as well. But once I got to Australia, I couldn't speak any English. Basically, I could say only a few words. That's why it took me even more than a week to just take for the first time going to city and just to know how to buy a ticket and that. So I kind of lost that experience as a poet, and then basically visual arts became my main art form, which I could communicate with the Australian audience, and then I always wanted to somehow use my poems as well in my work, and in a series of artworks. For example, in this one, I started collaborating with musicians from different backgrounds, and also reciting my poems. In this work, I asked audience to make a cardboard house. Everyone made a cardboard house. I mean, most of them, and then there would be music, and then I'll read some poems, and then at the end I would go basically and taking the hats off and burn them. So in a way, I kind of wanted to show. Wanted to, even for a minute, just asking the audience that you experienced a bit of losing your home, and basically losing your family, losing your friends and culture and country. And I'm gonna show you a bit of a video. I'm not sure how much time. Yeah. I always talk a lot, so I'm gonna find where is that video. It might be. So I'm gonna maybe another one. Great. So here I'm just gonna show you just. I'm going to show you just the end part of that song. this is a long video, and I just wanted to show a bit of that. And I just wanted to finish with reading a poem, which is also the name of this performance, and it's called "I Wish Grapes Would Ripen." Once I got to Australia, for about 4 months, I worked in a vineyard, and so you wake up at 4 o'clock, and then you take a 3 hours journey to get to a vineyard, and then you walk only yourself. You have a line, and then you walk all day, and so this poem starts by خدا کند انگورها برسند جهان مست شود تلو تلو بخورند خیابانها بر شانه هم بزنند رئیس جمهورها و گداها خدا کند مرزها مست شوند و محمد علی بعد از 17 سال مادرش را ببیند و آمنه بعد از 17 سال چینهای پیشانی کودکش را لمس کند. I wish the grapes would ripen, the world become drunk. The streets stumble, brush against each other, presidents and beggars. I wish borders could become drunk, and Muhammad Ali could see his mother after 17 years, and Amina could touch her child after 17 years. I wish grapes would ripen, Amu River would bring up his best-looking sons, Hindu Kush Mountain would free her daughters. For a moment, guns would forget to tear apart, knives to slash open, pens would write fire as ceasefire. I wish mountains would reach each other, sea would reach up to the sky and steal her moon, leopards and gazelles would go to pub drinking together. I wish the dryness will touch all things, the windows will break the walls, and you, while embracing your beloved tightly, would remember me, my darling, my faraway friend. Drink another cup with me, drink another cup with me, to all the vineyards overflowing with grapes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Need to breathe the silence. Any question? One or two? Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Powerful. I want to. You started with this the tree, yeah. Every child when he or she is born, the tree is planted, yeah. And you started from that painting, and I if I remember correctly, it's dying because drought in Afghanistan. It's yeah. And during many of your works, you come back to home, roots. Yeah, where is home? Where is homeland?
Yeah.
And when I think about that dying tree, which is rooted, and thinking about you, which is uprooted, I'm thinking about the power in homelessness, the power and potentialities in being on move, being not rooted, being a migrant, being an exile. And I wanted just to hear about, this is my idea about finding power in homelessness, yeah? Rejecting the idea of being at home altogether, yeah? Rejecting that idea. and finding power and beauty in being homeless. I mean, not houseless, but I mean, being not part of.
Definitely, I think if I try to understand your question, it's. I think for me it was like, because I was able to go back to that village after 21 years and found that tree. I kind of make sense of that. I still do have wish to go back again and visit again, but before that, before finding that place, I always felt that I'm not even. Is there a place that I belong to, where I really started, and especially where I was born? In a video work, I talk about that. I talk about the room that I was born, and how important it is for me to find that room, because I feel like I started from here, so that place exists. And so therefore I exist as well. However, from that time, it made me much more easier to also feeling that, look, I found that place, and then other places could be also home as well. So I do feel like, especially Australia and also Iran, and as my second and third home as well. And as you said, like, it does give you so much power just by going to other places. So although the reasons that we left those beautiful villages were not our choice, and we didn't want to, and it was so many people lost their life on those journeys, but that's the reality, and I do feel what do you mean, like by feeling also powerful because of that homelessness as well. Thank you.
We have one last question.
Yeah. I guess I want to just offer just a comment, and thank you for that observation. I think there's something really very fundamental in actually checking our politics as well. Because I think the presentation before also makes a very poignant point, actually, in a much more oblique way. That for many communities, there is a profound sense of freedom in actually inhabiting another space. And Edward Said makes this also very clear in his last memoir. So I think there's a way in which it's kind of produces its own nostalgia, and I don't want to conflate issues of refugees and different forms of immigration and different forms of labor. But I want to also point out that certain modes of labor and modes of immigration produce a type of freedom that can be exercised in a foreign context that cannot actually be exercised in sort of this idea of the home country. And I'm thinking about the way in which some women have been able to exercise certain freedoms outside of their countries. I think about large groups of men who come from Bangladesh and Pakistan, who are part of a new wave of labor in South Africa, particularly in Johannesburg, that find certain forms of freedom that they would have never actually found within their home space. So I think there's different tenors, and this is not only in relation to the presentation you offered, but also to sort of think that there is a quotidian life even in labor. And it's sort of a kind of a singular imaginary that insists that labor cannot live alongside a quotidian life. That actually the capacity for leisure is central to any forms of existence, even under extraordinary oppression. So I want to really thank all the presenters for the talks, and they were very nuanced and sort of layered But I do think actually there's a way in which we have to also think about the multifaceted possibilities that the imagination produces through these narratives of migration. So that was just really a comment, actually.
Beautiful, thank you. Great. Yeah, I mean, I could just mention that even in my family there was so many changes as if I imagined myself being in Afghanistan. I'm not sure if even I was alive, as many of my friends, my childhood friends, they got killed during the civil war, and my sister could never have been educated as they are now. Yeah, definitely agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Now we will have some coffee and tea and sandwiches. So we have 15 minutes break. Then we'll go back with 2 presentation discussion.